Last Saturday was a harrowing day for me. One of my cats, Mr. Tux, had been throwing up pretty much daily for almost a week. He was getting dehydrated and refusing to eat, and so I contacted a local vet that many of you had recommended, only to learn that during COVID they were not accepting new animals, and so they referred me to an urgent care center in Watertown. I got an appointment for 4 p.m. at the urgent care. I was dreading the process of getting Mr. Tux into his carrier, but since he was so lethargic anyway, he was in there before he knew what hit him. But he quickly figured it out, and he was expressing his displeasure before we were even out the door. I was prepared for the yowling. No matter, into the car he went. I got in, I hit the start button, nada. The battery was dead as a doornail. So now the cat is yowling and I can't even begin the half-hour trip. Already stressed about his condition, because that's why I'm going to urgent care, I didn't want to wait for AAA, so I began sending text messages to people who lived nearby. Can you jump a car? It was Sherry who responded, on my way, and was quick on the scene. But with covers over all the engine parts in her car, neither of us could actually find the battery to jump my car from. So we pull out the phone and watch a YouTube video on where to find the battery in her particular make and model of car. And we wait through some banter from the friendly guy in Texas who's hosting the video, but finally he reveals what we came to find out, and we were able to find the battery and take the cover off. Take the cover off the battery that turned out to have a totally corroded terminal. We tried it anyway, tried to scrape the stuff off and attach the clamps. No, didn't work. Did I mention that it was raining? Sherry is a hero in my book, in part because she simply does not give up until a problem is solved. So she called Bill to come with his car, which he promptly did, even as I also called AAA for yet another backup just in case. I was already going to be late for my 4 p.m. It was almost 4 p.m. by that time, and Tux was still complaining about his confinement. Bill beat AAA to the scene and jumped the car. Success! As he was removing the jumper cables and I was preparing to leave, he cried, "Wait!" He seemed troubled and yelled to me, "There's a rabbit in your engine." Well, I knew that couldn't be right, and so I rolled down the window so that I could hear him more clearly. "What?" "There's a rabbit in your engine." Wait. What? Is it alive? Yes, I can see its eyes down in the corner. So now it's total chaos. The car is running, the cat is yowling, Sherry and Bill are both pulling brushes and things with long handles out of their cars to stand in the rain and try to get down to the rabbit so that they can get him out and get him to safety. And at long last, the rabbit becomes the Energizer Bunny, jumps out, and runs away. Sherry then senses, correctly I might add, that I am about to fly into a million pieces. She pats me on the shoulder and says, "It's all fine now. The bunny is okay." With shaking fingers, I dialed the urgent care place because it's now after 4:30 and I've missed 2 appointment times. They could still take me at 5, so off I go with Tux, who is still not pleased to have been in a crate in a cold car for an hour. I deliver him to urgent care, handing him over in his carrier at the door since I can't go in because of COVID. I sit in the car, which is still running so that the battery won't die when I try to go home. I sit there for an hour and a half, order takeout from the restaurant across the street, but ask them to deliver it to the parking lot since I can't shut off the car, and wait for the vet to call me. She gives him nausea medication and tells me to meet the tech at the door to get Mr. Tux back. I take the carrier, turn to head towards the car, and then I see Tux halfway out the front of the carrier because they forgot to zip up the front of the carrier. I grab him so that he's not loose in a parking lot by a busy intersection in a strange city in the dark. And with hands shaking, I zip him back into the carrier and get him into the running car. We're both exhausted, but he's still not happy about either the carrier or the car and yowls all the way home. He's fine now, and I took salad greens when I got home and put them outside for the rabbit. The end. I have spent the time to tell that story, both because I am still traumatized by the thought of chasing Tux around Watertown in the dark, but also because I think it has a number of things to teach us about this week's fruit of the Spirit, which is patience. To begin with, never pray for patience unless you really, really mean it. And be prepared if you are foolhardy enough to plan to preach on it. Patience is something that's cultivated only by being thrust into situations where patience is necessary, which are not, trust me, fun places to be. In Romans 12:12, Paul tells us to be patient in affliction, which is a clue to when patience is called for. If everything is smooth sailing, you can't call yourself patient, and you can't practice patience. And practice is the only way you're ever going to get it. If you ask God for patience, the only way for God to grant that request is to repeatedly give you frustrating circumstances where you can practice, first with small frustrations, and as we master those, the frustrations get bigger until we may be at the point of true affliction. So be careful what you pray for. Secondly, as I sat for an hour and a half in a parking lot with my engine running and tried to process hearing the words, "There's a rabbit in your engine," I began to see that it was actually the perfect metaphor for what happens when we don't have patience. We need or we want something. In the case of the rabbit, it was a place to escape the cold wind and the rain. And we rush to the first thing that seems to fit the bill without thinking about what we're doing. That can make our initial problem worse, as it was for the rabbit, and in some cases might even get us killed. Patience is that thing that keeps us from jumping from the frying pan into the fire. Patience is what keeps us from flipping off the guy who cut us off in traffic. When we're patient, we have the presence of mind to realize that in cutting us off, he's showed us that he's not in a particularly patient mood to begin with, putting him in an unstable state and therefore less able to deal with someone else showing hostility. Our impatience with his impatience might lead him to ram our car or pull out a gun, which could land him in jail and make our day considerably worse, if not deadly. No one wins in the game of impatience. But we need to understand that patience is different than just simply waiting. If you've ever stood in a long line at the store, you'll know that while everyone is waiting, not everyone is patient. Some leave the line entirely and refuse to wait, even if staying in line would give them what they got in line for in the first place. But of those who remain, Some are constantly complaining, trying to jump the line, or making the lives of those around them miserable, while others just seem to find a way to hang out, chat, or find another way to bide their time until their turn comes around. Patience is not just waiting. It's about how we wait. Patience is the ability to soothe our inner rabbit so that we don't just jump into a car engine. With the rabbit at peace, we can survey our options and make wise decisions about when, where, or even if we're going to jump. Ironically, there are times when patience specifically leads us not to wait. In our example of people standing in line at the store, those who leave the line might be impatient, but they also might be masters of patience. Their ability to stay calm in a frustrating situation could allow them to quickly decide that whatever they were in line for was less important than another use of their time and leave, not in a huff, but in perfect peace about their decision. But let's up the stakes a little bit here. Patience is an active choice that we make to calm ourselves in a frustrating and difficult situation. That choice can't be forced. But while no one can force us to be patient, we frequently are forced to wait, either by outside forces or by our own circumstances. Waiting on the COVID vaccine is a good case in point, as we encounter both kinds of forced waiting frequently. On the one hand, there are the external forces of having to wait until the state says we qualify to get it. The state, in turn, is forced to wait to offer it to everyone until they have the supply. But even if we qualify, there are still instances where people are facing a long wait and a frustrating process, either to get an appointment in the first place or to stand in line to get the shot when they do. When you're a person with high risk factors for contracting COVID, giving up and leaving the line or stopping attempts to get the appointment aren't really an option. You need the vaccine. You have internal concerns forcing you to wait, and external forces making that wait long and frustrating. And that's even before you get into the questions of whether there's any funny business going on in creating the wait in the first place. When waiting is forced by external or internal forces or both, our rabbit gets really jittery very fast, which puts us at risk of ending up inside an engine. In the example of the vaccine, if we can't calm the rabbit as we try to navigate getting an appointment, we might risk our lives or the lives of others by giving up on getting the vaccine. Being able not just to wait, but to wait patiently can literally make the difference between life and death, because the patience affects our decision making. So how do we become patient when the rabbit is freaking out? We can quickly see that the other fruit of the Spirit we've already talked about come in handy here. Patience requires the meek spirit of humility that doesn't presume that we should be given preference over anyone else. It needs the kindness and generosity of heart that, in the example of waiting for the vaccine, empathizes with the healthcare workers and recognizes that they're doing the best they can in an unprecedented and often impossible situation. We need self-control to keep our tongues in check when we're upset. We need the faith that when our term comes, we'll still be there. If we wait and lives depend on us waiting, we'll get to the front of the line. Well, that's all well and good. But suppose I'm not good at any of that. What if I jump into the engine every single time and can't seem to really help myself? Excellent question. And the answer is that the crazy notion that everyone should just pull themselves up by their own bootstraps is nonsense. From the time Jesus called 12 others to live and watch and travel and learn with him until today, the Christian way has been to not go it alone. Even if we technically can, we shouldn't. Jesus did not begin his ministry until he formed a community around him. A community that was far less evolved than he was himself. But he needed them, and they needed him. We are meant to learn, live, grow, and eventually thrive in loving community. We've come to call the Christian version of that community church, although too many churches today have forgotten, twisted, or flat out abandoned that critical role. Last Saturday, when I was paralyzed by what I felt was a choice between the health of Mr. Tux and the life of a scared rabbit in my engine, Sherry immediately sensed my struggle. She came to the car window, she put her hand on my shoulder, and provided words of comfort. After freeing the literal rabbit, she soothed my inner rabbit when I could not, which allowed me then to drive safely to Watertown and get Tux the help that he needed. In that moment, Sherry stood in for all of you. She was the church, doing exactly what the church does when we are at its best. To produce the fruit of the Spirit in full measure requires a community that also values those virtues. If we have that, then we can risk turning the other cheek, forgiving someone, humbly allowing the last to go first, and trying a bit of patience, because we know that someone else will have the presence of mind to notice if there's a rabbit in our engine, and will come to the rescue when our battery is just flat out dead. In real Christian community, the cycle of give and take, of giving what we get and getting what we give, forgiving our debts as we forgive our debtors, stops sounding like judgment and starts to feel like salvation. It takes a village to soothe the rabbit. The last point that I want to make about patience is a warning not to kill the rabbit. The rabbit inside us, poised to jump, is not the thing that's preventing us from having patience. In fact, the ability to jump quickly when necessary is a rabbit's main defense. If our tendency is to jump too quickly, the answer is not to cut off our legs. Patience is the virtue that settles us down enough to evaluate whether the jump we're considering is a good idea. Patience is a form of peace, another one of those fruit of the Spirit. Patience is calming the rabbit, not killing the rabbit, so that we can make wise decisions while still preserving the ability to act as soon as necessary. While it's true that patience frequently involves waiting, it's an active waiting, strategic waiting. And in the Christian context, it's faithful waiting. It's not just sitting around waiting for God to fix something. If I'd done that, I'd still be sitting in the parking lot with Tux yowling in the car. Patience is doing what we can to live a life directed by the Spirit in a community of others, rather than a life on our own directed by the whims, emotions, and fears of the moment. Sometimes we can do that on our own, on one-off occasions here and there, but there will always come a day when we have met our match and we find ourselves stuck inside a roaring engine. We all need a community of those who share our values, who agree that the fruit of the Spirit are desirable things, and who are committed to giving and receiving the help that can produce the fruit in all of us together. And we can get there together. It just might take a little patience. Amen.
We return to God a portion of what has been given to us for God's work in our shared ministry. Friends and members are asked to prayerfully consider giving in support of Crawford's ministries and operations. You can give electronically by clicking the button in the weekly messenger or on our website, or mail a check to 34 Dick Street, Winchester, Mass. 01890. And now you can also text Crawford UMC to 44321. Thank you.